learning more about what's different with this year's proposal and compared to previous ones. And we've got a great session ahead for you. We'll go ahead and move on to the next slide here. I wanted to, first of all, for those of you just participating in our call the first time, the DTF is a nonprofit educational group that's been working on diesel issues since 2000, and particularly legacy products and modernizing and upgrading just about as long. So we represent a wide diversity of engine and equipment manufacturers, fuel refiners, and emissions control technology companies. And most of all, we want to be a partner in this conversation and national effort to upgrade and modernize existing diesel engines. So we thank you for joining us, and both members and non-members alike here today on the call. Our next slide just provides you a sort of a perspective of who you're going to be hearing from. You're hearing from me right now, and in a moment I'll introduce Jennifer Kruger with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, who will be sharing with us some important insights about the new program. But before that, just take everyone back for a second about a little bit of history about DERA. Those of us that have been involved in it for quite a while remember that the actual efforts to upgrade diesel engines began in the early 2000s with EPA's efforts and focusing initially on clean school buses. And those evolved quite rapidly and successfully into an interest in Congress of providing federal funding and support for a broader effort that came to be known as the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, or DERA. And that was enacted in 2005, and the first chapter in DERA's history was that 5-year period of 2005 to 2010. And during that time, we saw tremendous success and popularity of this program, and in fact, it has become one of the most iconic voluntary incentive-based programs that EPA has put forward in the last decade. And when you look at the health and cost-benefit analysis, you can understand why, that for every dollar invested in upgrading existing diesel engines, there is a significant return in the form of $13, at least in public health and environmental benefits. So making diesel engines cleaner and upgrading them, repowering them, using emissions control technology, particulate filters, catalytic converters, all of those strategies go toward extending the life of existing diesel engines and reducing their environmental impact. So we've had a great success in this first chapter of the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act. But like all good things, change comes, and we accept change. And now we're here today to talk about the second chapter of DERA. As you might remember, Congress reauthorized the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act during the last part of the legislative session in 2010, and the program continued on last year, and now this year we're back with some additional funding that's just announced last week. So our webinar is timely today for those of you who are beginning to work with your customers and others about the prospects for modernizing and upgrading engines. This will be particularly helpful. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Jennifer, and she has been part of this journey really since just about the beginning, even before it was called the Clean Diesel Campaign, and has worked on a wide variety of aspects of this very successful program, including the quantifier, which we all turn to calculate those benefits from diesel upgrades and retrofit, and as well as the Emerging Technology Program. And many small companies and large companies alike have benefited from EPA's support in investing in emerging technologies. And now, more recently, she's heading up the communications team within the DERA program. But just like at the DTF, when you're in a group like that, you learn to multitask and do a lot of things. And we're delighted to have Jennifer with us today on the call. And I just want to offer one sort of advisory as we get started. Because this is a now active proposal, the RFP has actually been issued from EPA. There are limitations on how specific the responses can be to questions that you may pose to Jennifer about the agency's program, how they might plan to handle it, or what priorities they might give to special projects. So if you can keep your questions as general as possible, and we appreciate your consideration of the limitations that EPA has in talking about this now. There is a mechanism to submit very specific questions to the Clean Diesel campaign team, and Jennifer will tell you about that in a minute. So she'll do her best to answer questions that you come up with, but recognizing that we do have some limitations. So appreciate everyone's understanding of that. So without any further delay, let me ask Jennifer to join us and tell us about this next chapter in the history of the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act.
Alrighty, thanks Alan and thanks Kristen. On behalf of EPA, we're definitely excited to be participating and being able to have yet another venue to share this information. We're really looking forward to some exciting proposals coming up. As Alan had mentioned, this is part of the reauthorization of DERA. And like you said, while it was great, change happens. Part of the reason for this change with the reauthorization was also a decrease in funding that we haven't received. We didn't receive as much funding as we have in the past, which because of that, as well as because of the experience that we've gained, we've really had an opportunity to review the projects that we've done in the past, and it's given us an opportunity to sharpen and focus our attention to make sure that we're really going to get the best bang for our buck with these projects. So like Alan said, we are kind of limited on the types of questions we can answer in a session like this because the RFP is now open. At the end of my presentation, I'll have a slide that has the email address, but just so you folks know it right off the bat, all questions can be submitted to cleandiesel@epa.gov. And I'll even offer up while I'm doing this presentation, feel free to submit those questions to that email address. Again, it's cleandiesel@epa.gov. We do have a process for submitting for replying to questions. All questions submitted by Wednesday of a given week will then be included on a questions and answers document, which can be found on our webpage. And I believe that document is updated every Friday evening or possibly Monday morning. So as long as you submit a question by the end of Wednesday, you should see your answer in that document by first thing Monday morning. So with that, let me go ahead and get started. I do want to point out that I'm going to kind of try to focus on the changes of this RFP as they've changed from past RFPs, more so than some of the generic information. So if there is, if there is something that I've glossed over for folks that are sort of new to the program, Kristen, I'm not sure if it's possible to interrupt me and have me explain a little bit more. So if folks send something in the questions and answers field. So this first slide, I just wanted to point out a couple of the major changes. In the past, we've had a requirement to ensure that 50% of the funds are used on public fleets. That is no longer a requirement. So now it gives us an easier opportunity to target some of the private organizations that may have been in need for some of this funding for upgrading diesel engines that, while they're private organizations, they may have been smaller mom and pop type companies that just didn't have the access to do something like this on their own. We have also had the removal of the restriction of using funds for programs mandated by state or local law. It is still, we can't use this money if it's for a federal mandate, but if it's for state or local law, so folks in New York, I think it's local law 77, folks in California that were limited on being able to apply for the grants because there was going to be a mandate that you would have to retrofit your vehicles. That no longer applies. Let's see here. So just going over some of the basic information. Under the National Funding Assistance Program for this year, we have an estimated approximately $20 million available to give out, and this is going to include non-tribal as well as tribal projects. I think probably most of the folks on the call fall under the non-tribal category, so I'll spend most of my time talking about that. There's a couple of exceptions for the tribal organizations, but not that many. So all of our documents, the RFP, as well as the frequently asked questions document that I mentioned earlier, and a couple of other documents which I'll walk through, are available on our website, which is epa.gov/clean diesel, and that stands for Program National. All of the grants, all of the proposals must be turned in by May 30th of this year. That's a little bit of a shorter time than what we've had in the past. In the past, we've seen approximately 60 days. This year, it's a little bit less. It's around 45 days, give or take. There are specific times. We do have time deadlines as to when proposals must be turned in, and that is going to vary based on what region an applicant is submitting to. So I'm going to stress, to review the RFP, specifically Section 4, which will tell you the specific time for submission for each region. There are 3 options, and we ask that folks only select one. We don't want to get proposals. We don't want to get the same proposal submitted multiple different ways. So you can email proposals in. Again, the email address for these, as well as mailing in a hard copy, the email address and hard copy address can all be found in Section 4, where it also indicates what the time limit is for submitting a proposal. We also have our option of using the grants.gov webpage for submittals. So the eligible entities, this component has not changed from past years. An eligible entity is a region, state, local, tribal, or port agency with jurisdiction over transportation or air quality, or it can be a nonprofit organization or institution which represents or provides pollution reduction or educational services, or one that has a principal purpose in the promotion of transportation or air quality. I do want to point out that in eligible entities, there is always the opportunity to partner with an eligible entity in order to target vehicles that may not necessarily fall as an eligible entity. New this year is a limitation on the number of proposals that may be submitted. In the past, we've allowed applicants to submit multiple proposals to multiple regions, and in the past we've received multiple proposals from multiple organizations to all of the regions. This year we are limiting the proposals to 2. An applicant may only submit 2 proposals, and it's one per region. So what's going to happen is if someone does submit more than 2 proposals to the program as a whole, or more than 1 proposal to a region, we are going to contact that applicant and ask them which one they would like to withdraw. So I would strongly advise don't even bother doing a 3rd one. It's just not going to be worth the effort since we're not going to be reviewing that. The eligible projects, this component, while the funding has changed slightly, there actually has been a couple of changes in this, but the generic technologies are still the same. Verified retrofit technologies, verified idle reduction technologies, aerodynamic and low rolling tires, engineer powers, and vehicle and equipment replacement. I do want to point out here for the first bullet, verified retrofit technologies. In the past, we have had an emerging technology program where we've had a separate grant competition for emerging technologies. This year, we are not holding that competition, but we're still keeping this component to the verified technology. So anyone looking at the emerging technology list, those technologies will not be permitted under this competition. The eligible vehicles and engines and equipment has not changed from the last year. It still includes buses, medium-duty or heavy-duty trucks, marine engines, locomotives, as well as non-road equipment. So new this year, though, while the vehicles haven't changed, we do have some restrictions on the type of vehicles. So from an on-highway, for all on-highway vehicles, we are only targeting vehicles that are 1988 and newer. So 1988 and older vehicles will not be considered eligible. Likewise, for non-road equipment, anything with less than 7 remaining years of useful life is not going to be considered eligible. EPA has prepared a document that's going to assist folks with this. I do have the website listed beneath there, and unfortunately I can't pull it up for you guys, but I will say that this document is going to be, it'll be pretty helpful, and what it does is outlines the vehicles based on horsepower, what is going to be eligible and not eligible. And the 7-year remaining lifetime is based on EPA's non-road model as to when a vehicle theoretically should be retired. So for folks applying with non-road equipment, definitely take a look at that link, review the spreadsheet. It's listed by, it's organized by equipment. It's first organized by horsepower, then equipment, and then model year of the engine. Anywhere a section is shaded in gray means the vehicle is not eligible. Anything shaded in green is considered eligible. Under project funding, any type of verified retrofit device, this will be funded at 100%. This has not changed since last year. Engine upgrades are now being funded at 50%, and this is actually a decrease. Last year we were funding them at 75%. This year we are now funding them at 50%. As for clean fuels, this stays the same. This is the cost differential between the conventional diesel fuel and the new cleaner fuel being used. A couple of changes with verified idle reduction technologies. This year, EPA is not funding standalone idle reduction technologies, with a couple of exceptions. Shore power connection, we will fund at 25%. Truck stop electrification will be funded at 25%. And locomotive idle reduction strategies will be funded at 50%. In order for all other vehicles, in order for idle reduction to be funded, they must be combined with an eligible verified exhaust control technology. So, for example, an APU would be funded if a diesel particulate filter is also going on that truck. And obviously it must be an improvement. It's not going to work to put, to replace an old diesel particulate filter with a new diesel particulate filter in order to get that APU. It must be an overall improvement on the truck. And I do want to point out that APUs are eligible only on long-haul Class 8 vehicles with 2006 or older engine configurations. Anything 2007 or newer, APUs are not considered eligible. Verified aerodynamic technologies and low rolling resistance tires also fall under the same category as idle reduction strategies. EPA this year will not fund standalone aerodynamic or tire projects. However, we will fund them if they're, again, combined with a verified exhaust control technology, and in which case we'll fund both of them at 100%. Certified engine repowers, I think I mentioned this before, EPA will fund them at 50% of the cost, but of course the repowers must be certified to a more stringent set of emission standards. This does include any associated hardware costs with the repower. The old engine must be scrapped, rendered permanently disabled, or it can be returned to the original engine manufacturer for remanufacturing, with the understanding that the remanufacturing must be done to a certified cleaner emission standard for non-road engines and to a model year 2007 standard or newer than that for on-highway engines. Vehicle and equipment replacements. For drayage trucks, we will fund these up to 50% of the cost. The vehicles must be powered to a 2007 or newer model year, and they must meet operational guidelines and definition of a drayage truck as stated in the RFP. For all other vehicles, we will fund replacements at 25% of the cost, and these must be powered to a 2011 standard or newer. And again, any vehicles being replaced, the original vehicle must be scrapped and the engine scrapped, or the engine be remanufactured to the next EPA standard. So something new that we're doing this year for non-road repowers or replacements, we obviously have in the past have said it must be to a higher tier level. This year we are focusing more specifically on what tier level it can, the repower replacement can occur at. So this is a simplified table of what is actually in the RFP, but it gives you an idea of what's occurring. On the left-hand side is the original engine and the tier level, and up above is what you're repowering or replacing that engine to. So using the chart, you can determine what EPA would fund. So for example, a Tier 0 locomotive, the sort of pinkish, orangish column in the middle, that would not be funded at a Tier 1 repower or replacement. To have a Tier 0 locomotive project funded, it would have to be upgraded to a Tier 2 or higher. So in order to, the proposal evaluation process, there's a couple of steps here. Step 1 is to review the threshold criteria in Section 3C. And I didn't mention this before. I should mention it, though. Everyone really needs to make sure they read the RFP in its entirety. I realize that it's a lengthy document, but this presentation should not be used as a substitute for understanding all components of the RFP. there are other information. There's other information in there that I am not going over. So I have to stress the importance of reading through the entire RFP and making sure all sections are comprehended. So there are 5 threshold criteria that folks need to ensure that they meet. And if you bear with me a second, I will read through those directly from the RFP. So the ones that actually the threshold criteria that folks need to be concerned with are the proposal content and submission. So this is ensuring that the proposals substantially comply with what's required in the RFP, including following the page limit, that the proposals are received by one of those 3 methods that I reviewed earlier, that proposals are including eligible vehicles, as we just talked about, and that they meet, that the proposals must support Goal 1 of EPA's strategic plan, which is identified in the threshold eligibility criteria. So after reviewing, ensuring that all proposals meet the threshold criteria review, the next step for EPA in evaluating the proposals is the actual evaluation criteria. There's 10 evaluation criteria, and this has actually changed slightly from last year, and points are assigned to each category. So for non-tribal proposals, applicants are scored out of a possible 100 points. For tribal proposals, if there's any folks who would submit a tribal proposal on the line, they are actually evaluated out of a possible 74 points. The reason being, tribes are not evaluated under criteria number 3, location, or criteria number 6, regional significance. So non-tribal applicants obviously submit the proposal to the region, to the region that you're interested in applying to, as listed in Section 4. The proposals are then given a numerical score and ranked in order, following the steps that I just went over. And then the winning proposals are recommended to the EPA approving official, who then considers the ranks, and then actually they're the ones who select the proposals for funding. What I don't have in this presentation, but I'll mention it here, since we do have less funding than originally in the past, we are looking at awarding fewer proposals than we have. So for each region, we are looking at awarding between 1 and 2, maybe a third one, but that's not stated in the RFP. So it's most likely 1 to 2 proposals. So when you look at that with 10 regions, we're looking at funding between 10 and 20 proposals. So again, I have to stress reviewing the RFP and being very careful and concise with your application, since we do have fewer proposals, or since we are going to have fewer grants this year. I have to point out the competition is going to be very tight. So for the evaluation criteria, and this is listed in Section 5 of the RFP, the 10 criteria are the overall summary and overall approach. This category has not changed, but the point value has changed. In the past, this has been more of a high dollar category. Because we've added a couple new criterions in, we have dispersed the point system a little bit more so. Results for determining the outcomes and outputs have not changed. Programmatic priority location and programmatic priority diesel reduction effectiveness. These two are, as well as the other programmatic priorities, are the new evaluation criteria that we've added this year. So I do want to spend a little bit of time on those. The regional significance, the regions do have the ability to score proposals based on what is on issues current in their region, and those have the ability. Those could have changed from last year. So I strongly recommend reviewing for the region that you wish to apply to. Make sure you read through those regional significances, which are in the RFP. Past performance, staff experience qualifications, budget and resources, and the applicant fleet description have not changed from last year. So the programmatic priority location. This is a very new feature in this RFP, so I want to spend some time on it. What's going to happen is applicants will be evaluated based on the actual location of the project. And there's two different categories that an applicant can receive points for. The first one is 8 points will be awarded to projects located in priority county or areas as listed in Appendix D of the RFP. So what is a priority county? It's anything that's designated as PM 2.5 or ozone non-attainment or ozone maintenance areas. Any area where the population is exposed to more than 2 micrograms per meter cubed of diesel particulate matter emissions. Any areas designated as a federal Class 1 area, or I should say and/or any county or area that has been accepted into EPA's new Ozone Advanced program by the close of the RFP. And actually, this states that it's May 29th. I'll point out that is an error. The deadline is May 30th. So how do you determine what, if a county is exposed to more than 2.0 micrograms per meter cubed? In Appendix D, we have a list of all of those counties out there. They are organized first by state and then by county in alphabetical order. So if you see that your county on that list, then it will receive 8 points. Another 8 points will be awarded to projects that are located in areas of highly concentrated diesel pollution. So this includes ports, rail yards, construction sites, school bus yards, depot yards. If a proposal includes vehicles operating in more than one county or area, what will happen is that we will review each component of the proposal on an individual basis and then average those scores together so that one proposal will receive 1 score for this criterion. And as I mentioned before, tribal applicants are not evaluated under this criterion. So the next one, programmatic priority, diesel reduction effectiveness. This gets us more into the sharpening and focusing of the RFP, if you will. Applicants will be evaluated on the extent to which the project effectively reduces diesel emissions by maximizing the useful life and annual operating hours of any certified engine configuration or verified technology. So what is going to happen here in, I don't have the appendix, my apologies. In, I believe it's Appendix E, we have tables defined that points out that defines what score an eligible entity will receive for the type of vehicle based on the model year of the vehicle and the technology being applied to that vehicle. So again, Appendix E within the RFP, and for example, within this appendix, you can look up information on medium-duty and heavy-duty diesel trucks and transit buses. We have a separate table specifically for school buses, a separate table for non-road engines and equipment, and this is based not on model year, but on annual usage rate. We have a separate table for locomotives, line haul, and switchers, which are based on the original engine tier and the annual usage rate. And we also have tables for marine vessels, which is also based on the original engine tier. So for this one, what you'd want to do is look up the type of vehicle that you're interested in retrofitting, determining either the model year or the annual usage rate, determining what type of technology would apply to that, and then you can see what score that type of project would receive. With our projects, we normally don't receive one straight school bus project. We normally see projects that are targeting school buses, refuse haulers, some delivery trucks. So as with the last criteria, what's going to happen here is for projects that are targeting multiple vehicles with multiple strategies, we will review each vehicle strategy combination separately, create a score for that, and then average those scores together. So again, that there's one score per proposal under this criterion. So what I want to go over is talk a little bit about some of the potential pitfalls that might occur with a project. It is extremely difficult to change a project midstream. With the scoring criteria that I just went over, it's much more precise and finite. So changes to a proposal after it is awarded theoretically could affect the overall score of the proposal. And with most of these competitions, the winning proposal wins out not by 20 and 30 points, but by 5 and 10 points. So losing, a couple points here and there could ultimately change the overall ranking of all the proposals, and in which case deem your proposal not to be one of the ones selected. So I will caution folks to do whatever research is possible beforehand to ensure that a project will move forward as defined in the statement of work, and not, so we don't have to worry about trying to figure out how to make changes afterwards. Vehicle and technology options. Not all technology combinations are appropriate for all vehicles. I think probably a lot of the folks on the call are aware of DPFs, that they must meet an exhaust temperature threshold. If it's possible to determine if the vehicle meets that DPF temperature threshold before proposing, so that it's, so we don't have to change it or face the consequences of attempting to change it to something like a DOC halfway through. Definitely do as much homework as possible ahead of time. A couple of other potential pitfalls that I'll go over that aren't included in the, let me just make sure. Okay, yeah, that are not included in this presentation are to thoroughly plan and document all engine upgrades and repowers. Engine upgrades and repowers must achieve reduction based on the verified level to a more stringent standard, and many older vehicles cannot accept the current technology of the engine. So it's important to know if you want to do a engine upgrade or repower to understand if it's an older vehicle, can a repower, can an engine upgrade work with that vehicle prior to submitting a proposal? I think a lot of folks are familiar with our verified technology list. You know, they're verified for a specific type of vehicle, for a specific model year. You know, so just pointing out, you know, make sure folks review that verified list to make sure that, as well as understanding all of the operating criteria that are associated with the verified technology. And again, let me point out that this year for this competition, we are not supporting emerging technologies under this RFP. If folks have questions about the emerging technology program as a whole, you can definitely feel free to contact me and I can talk about that program more so. One last thing to point out, reporting. I can't say that enough. We have a number of types of reports that must be submitted quarterly. These quarterly reports and detailed fleet information go into our national databases. So it's very important to have clear and concise information when submitting a proposal and then afterwards when managing a grant. So let me just point out a couple of tools and resources. Part of we have the applicant fleet description, which is required part of the proposal. That is used to describe fleets in detail, and we have a sample of it available at our website. We also have a sample project narrative format, which, you know, this is a very helpful tool. The more a project narrative fits with our sample, the easier it is for us to review, and the less likely it is for some information to be included that is included in a different section not be overlooked. We have, as I mentioned before, our priority county and area list. So when you're trying to determine if your project location occurs in one of those priority areas, this document will outlines all of those counties. We have, for non-road engine replacements, we have the model year eligibility document. And then, as always, we have our diesel emissions quantifier, which we strongly urge folks to use when calculating the emission reductions from a project or when submitting a proposal. So I mentioned this already, our frequently asked questions. This is posted weekly on our webpage. Questions can be submitted via email to cleandiesel@epa.gov. Questions that are submitted by the end of the day on Wednesday will be available either late Friday or first thing Monday morning. And I believe the last date for submitting questions is May 23rd. Any questions submitted after May 23rd will not be addressed as the RFP is closing on May 30th. So with that, that's all the information I have. Alan, Kristen, we can see if there's any generic questions that can be answered.
Sure.
But like Alan mentioned at the very beginning, some of the more technical questions must be submitted to the email address.
Very good, and thank you so much, Jennifer, for that very thorough and detailed description of this new opportunity with the second generation of Diesel Emissions Reduction Act funding. A number of you have submitted questions on the right. I'm going to do my best to present these in a way that Jennifer possibly can answer them and give us some additional guidance, and then there's always the option that was just outlined to submit to the website. I guess the first question that has arisen is one about the mechanics of the timing of this. I think a number of folks have suggested that the RFP was noting a June 4th date, and in your presentation here and other places, it's been noted as a May 30th date. Can you just clarify what the actual ending date is?
Sure. Actually, let me just double check that. That could have been. Okay, Alan, I'm glad folks were bringing that up. The close date is actually June 4th. May 30th was an original slated date. The release was not, the opening of the RFP did not occur when we had planned. So thanks for folks for bringing that up. It is June 4th.
Okay, so we just got everyone 5 extra days. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good. Appreciate that. So just to clarify for everyone on the call that your deadline to have things to EPA is June 4th. So check your RFP, and for those of you that recognize that, good catch, and thank you for that question. Now, the rest of the questions will be not that easy. One of the notes here is that if a project includes ATUs, aerodynamic technologies, and diesel particulate filters, would the grant pay for all 3 of these?
If the DPF, an APU, and an aero strategy are all going on one vehicle, then yes. If an APU is going on one vehicle, an aerodynamic strategy is going on another vehicle, and a DPF is going on a 3rd vehicle, then no, that would not be considered eligible.
Okay, very good. Another somewhat related question, getting into the issue of drayage trucks. So is it the understanding that EPA will now pay for 50% of a used 2008 truck that replaces something that's pre-2007? And then do the drayage trucks being replaced have to be newer than 1988?
Okay, let me make sure I understand the question. So the question is, does a 1998 and newer drayage truck vehicle have to be, can it be replaced with a 2008 vehicle?
Yeah, let me try that one again. If you have a drayage truck, and you want to replace that truck, so EPA will pay 50% of the used 2008 truck that is replacing something that's made prior to 2007. Is that correct? So 50% possibility there for a successful applicant?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then the follow-on then is, do the drayage trucks being replaced have to be newer than 1988? That cutoff year.
That one, actually that's a really good question. I believe it's for all on-highway vehicles, including drayage trucks. But I would ask the person submitting that question to submit that question to EPA at cleandiesel@epa.gov.
Okay. A question relative to whether or not the data logging of exhaust temperatures, is that actually covered by the funding? Okay, I'm going to have to refer this one to the email address as well. Okay, so you got your referral on that one also. Thank you. Let's see. Another question, in Appendix E of the proposal, which looks at the effectiveness of various diesel reduction strategies, it looks like the chart for the heavy-duty on-road vehicles does not score aero and idle reduction technologies. So how does the agency score those in evaluating these proposals?
That is yet another excellent question that unfortunately I cannot answer on this call.
Okay. Another one for the submission books. Let's see. A question just came in. Why 2011 model year engines and not 2010 emissions for on-highway, given the fact that I think the questioner is suggesting that nothing changed in the emissions performance or certification standards from that 2010 to 2011, yet EPA has indicated it's 2011.
True. We want to target the newest engines available, which they're 2011 engines, so we're targeting the newest ones that someone can acquire.
Okay. I have a question here regarding the status of if a client worked for two different not-for-profits and submitted the same vehicle list and technology to retrofit, would this be okay? What if the same client submitted two different fleet lists to two different not-for-profits or funding agencies?
Let me see and make sure I understand this question properly. So we're talking about a not-for-profit organization partnering with two different organizations, and we're wondering if that counts as two separate proposals, or if a third proposal can be submitted. Is that kind of the angle that this question is asking?
Yeah, it's sort of more along the lines of would this be okay? I guess it's sort of like forum shopping. Would one non-for-profit maybe have better weighting than another, perhaps, if it was the same vehicle list and technology?
Well, proposals are not compared to one another. So what's going to happen is, if we get more than 3 proposals from one not-for-profit organization, regardless of who they're partnering with, one proposal will have to be turned away. On the flip side, if one private entity partners with multiple different not-for-profit organizations, with the not-for-profit organization being the one that is submitting the application, those proposals are not going to be compared to one another. We will probably double-check, and if it looks like we're getting, for awarding, if it looks like we're looking to award 8 different proposals to Coca-Cola, we may start to second guess that. Alan, I'm not sure if I'm answering that question correctly.
I think you're getting at the essence of it, but in this case as well, I would maybe direct the questioner to pose that scenario into the email.
I think that would be a good idea. Yeah. Just
to get a confidence on what exactly that might be. Another questioner has asked a simple question using do RICE and NESHAP projects qualify? Now, this is the reciprocating internal combustion engine and recent standards for, I suspect, things like power generation. So do RICE and NESHAP projects qualify for funding?
A very easy question, but that one has to go to the email address. I'm sorry.
Okay. Please send that one on to the EPA's email address. Here's a question regarding engine repowers. Can you repower a vehicle or piece of equipment with a remanufactured engine? If so, what level of emissions does the reman engine need to meet?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think I'm going to have to defer this one to the clean diesel one to make sure we get a thorough understanding. I will suggest for the person submitting the question to identify if they're referring to non-road equipment, and then specify if it's also locomotive or a marine vessel.
Very good. I think that's sage advice for everyone. If you're submitting a question to the EPA website, be as specific as possible.
Yeah. Let me point out what sometimes happens with these questions and answers. It is helpful when the question is specific, but in order for fairness of the competition, what we might end up doing is generalizing the question to some degree to make sure that it can apply to other folks. But it does help us when the question itself is specific, so we know what you're asking.
Okay. Just referring back to the previous question of a person that would be submitting the same technology list to 2 non-for-profits, the questioner is wanting to make sure that doing that would not on its own disqualify the non-for-profit for being eligible to receive a grant.
You mean submitting, having multiple nonprofits using similar fleets, would that disqualify one or both of the not-for-profits? If that's what the question is asking, no, that will not disqualify the not-for-profits.
Great. I think you got it exactly. That was the question that's being asked, and the questioner has indicated that you interpreted that properly.
Okay, great.
Jennifer, I've got maybe a little bit of an easier one for you. Could you just describe for us what happens when this review process starts internally? What is this? How does this work at EPA in the reviewing process? If you could just give us some feeling of the texture and, sort of what happens there in terms of the people involved and how things work.
Sure. Well, if anyone has ever applied to our competition before, they do know that it is a very lengthy process. So while the competition may close in June, folks, and I know we probably have this listed in the RFP. I don't have it off the top of my head. Let me see if I can pull it up real quickly. We probably, if it closes in June, we probably won't be awarding until the fall time frame, and we probably won't be notifying folks until closer to end of July. So it is a lengthy process. But what happens once the competition closes? We organize all of the proposals. Each region will review their own proposal submissions. We have the folks here at DC at headquarters. We do participate in those reviews. So the proposals are reviewed based on the criteria that I talked about in my presentation, which is in much more detail in the RFP. So it's basically a straight reviewing off of what those scoring criteria are. It's then, I'll say it's the bureaucratic red tape of once the scores once the proposals are scored, they're scored by a number of different folks. Those scores are then averaged, and then the proposals are ranked. They're then pretty much awarded in straight order. Highest score being awarded first. But then we take them through a review board through all of the management. And within each region, it's they probably have a slightly different method, so I can't talk to what that process is. But basically it gets down to the point of the EPA approving official. From a headquarters standpoint, one of the stops along the way, if folks are familiar with the OTAC chain of management, it does get approved by the OTAC director, Margot Oge. Within the regions, I'm not sure if it just goes to the deputy director or if it goes to the regional director. But it does take some time, as folks are aware, from once a proposal is submitted to all the way through to finally, which proposals get the seal of approval and are turned into grants. After a proposal is selected for award, and I'll say selected because what happens is we are not requesting all of the documents. This is a request for proposals. There are 5, 6, 7 other forms that are required. So once a proposal is selected, we will then request a number of different forms, and we get the grants office involved. And there's a couple other steps in the grants office. I apologize, I'm not familiar with that process. I think every time we close a competition, we go through that, and we're done. I try to delete it from my memory. But we work with the grants office. We compile all of the application or all of the other forms, and it is not until the grantee or the selectee receives a letter from the grants office that they become a grantee and that the project is officially awarded. It's not until then can they start talking to the public and announcing that they've received this. So like I said, in July, they'll be notified that they've been selected. but it may not become an actual grant until the fall, and that's when the work can get started. So it's probably a little bit of a long-winded answer, and I probably didn't give you quite the picture that folks want, but hopefully that somewhat answers the question.
No, that's great. We're all sitting wondering whether these all show up in your inbox or, they're just dumped on a big table and folks go through a process. I'm being funny, of course, but no, I think that's helpful for folks to know quite the level of effort that you and your staff put into evaluating these in a very scientific, quantitative way that has yielded some very strong projects and is the backbone behind these results that have been that we talk about all the time in terms of benefits. So that's a very helpful insight, and I don't know if that gives everyone more comfort or not, but it's good to know the level of examination and that it may offer some more patience for some that are itching to find out if they've won the award. So
patience is a virtue that folks desperately need in this, and depending on how all the different regions operate, I'm not sure. I know from a headquarters point of view, when I would run the Emerging Technologies program, I know folks would, after a while, get antsy and start emailing me asking if there's any further updates. And well, internally, we've done a lot of work. Externally, unfortunately, our reply would be, sit tight, we're still not done yet.
Absolutely, and important to be fair to all parties involved, and we'll look forward to helping promote the announcements of the winners, and looking forward to understanding more about those great projects and results. I think kind of a final question that's come in here, and one that we can, I think, speak to at the end of this this webinar is can the agency make a copy of this presentation available, or a link to it available, so folks could refer to it, keeping in mind, of course, as you said, that this is not the actual RFP. You have to look at the whole thing.
That is actually a really good question. Let me just double check that. We may actually have this presentation available on our webpage. Maybe not. You know what? Alan, let me double check that. We don't need someone to submit that question to cleandiesel@EPA.gov. Let me double check if with a couple folks here, and I will get back with you and Kristen if that can be disseminated to the folks on the call.
Okay. Just a reminder to everyone, we are recording this webinar, so you could go back and look at this again and hear this a second time, or review parts of it as needed. So we'll have some final points on that in just a moment. If there are not any other questions, and we haven't seen any more come in, I want to just take this opportunity to thank you, Jennifer, very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to help educate yet again those that are working on these issues, and to help provide a means of getting some really helpful federal assistance in upgrading these engines. So we appreciate that, and everyone, thank you all for being on the call today. And we appreciate your attention. Kristen, any final housekeeping items?
The presentation and the recorded webinar and all the presentations will be on the Diesel Technology Forum website within the next couple of days, and you'll be sent an email for everyone that attended. That's all I had. Thank you for joining us.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. I can stick it in.